rumble and ended with the most violent volcanic eruption in U.S. history, and it was more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It's late, and tonight we're looking at Mount St. Helens, a volcano that erupted with such force it stunned scientists and reshaped an entire region. This isn't just a story about lava, it's about pressure, warnings, and a disaster no one expected. So still up, settle in, let's get into what really happened. On May 18th, 1980, the most deadly and economically destructive volcanic eruption in U.S. history changed the landscape of the Pacific Northwest forever. Mount St. Helens, once a peaceful snow-capped peak, became the center of a disaster that shocked the scientific world and left a permanent scar on the American landscape. This is the story of how it formed, why it erupted, and what came after. Mount St. Helens lies in the Cascade Range of the Pacific Northwest, a chain of volcanoes formed by a process called subduction. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, the Juan de Fuca plate began sliding beneath the North American plate deep under the Earth. As the oceanic plate was forced downward, it melted, generating magma that rose toward the surface. Volcanoes like Mount Rainier, Mount Hood, and Mount St. Helens were all born from this underground collision. But Mount St. Helens is younger than most. The modern cone began forming only around 40,000 years ago. Though, volcanic activity at the site goes back to over 275,000 years ago. Its steep cone-shaped structure and violent pass made it a classic stratovolcano built from layers of ash, lava, and rock from previous eruptions. What makes Mount St. Helens so different from the others? It's the most active volcano in the Cascade Range. Unlike many of its siblings in the Cascade Range, it had a clear and well-documented build-up to its major eruption. It offered scientists a historic chance to observe a volcanic eruption in real time, something rare in the United States, helping them learn more about volcanic activity. Mount St. Helens also had something else: proximity. It stood just 96 miles south of Seattle, near many rural communities, logging operations, and rivers. And after the eruption, Mount St. Helens became one of the most studied volcanic activities in history, reshaping how we understand volcanic hazards, predictions, and recovery. March 1980, Mount St. Helens awoke. A series of small earthquakes shocked the area. Then, steam and ash began venting from the summit. Over the next few weeks, a visible bulge drew on the mountain's north flank, at one point expanding outward up to 5 feet per day. Scientists and geologists were on alert, but the public and even many experts couldn't fully predict what was going to happen. Still, access to the mountain was restricted. Roads were closed. Journalists and geologists were required to watch from a distance. May 18th, 1980, at 8:32 a.m., a magnitude 5.1 earthquake shook the region. Suddenly, the entire north face of the mountain collapsed in a massive landslide, surging across Spirit Lake and into the North Fork Toutle River Valley. The collapse uncorked the pressurized magma chamber, triggering a lateral blast, a sideways explosion of ash, gas, and rock. This wasn't just a vertical eruption like typical volcanoes. It was a horizontal explosion, traveling at over 300 miles per hour, flattening everything in its path. In minutes, 230 square miles of forest were destroyed. A pyroclastic flow followed, with searing hot gas and debris racing down the slopes. Ash rose 80,000 feet into the atmosphere, darkening skies across the northwest. Within days, ash fell as far as the Midwest. Spirit Lake was choked with debris, and its surface was lifted over 200 feet, and it was reshaped entirely. Entire forests were flattened, rivers were clogged with mud flows, causing floods and destruction miles downstream. Towns like Toutle, Washington were covered in ash. Airports were closed, and power was disrupted in several areas. But perhaps the most dramatic change was to the mountain itself. Mount St. Helens lost 1,300 feet of elevation, and in its place was a massive crater, 1 mile wide and half a mile deep. Despite the destruction, the landscape slowly began to recover. Within weeks, scientists spotted signs of life. Small plants began to grow in the ash. Animals returned: birds, frogs, and elk. Spirit Lake stabilized, and new water systems formed. The eruption site became a living laboratory. Today, Mount St. Helens National Monument protects the area and allows scientists to study how life recovers after a volcanic disaster. The volcano also reawoke in between 2004 and 2008, not explosively, but by slowly building a lava dome within the crater. The 1980 eruption left more than a crater. It left a mark on the people, the region, and science itself. Entire communities had to dig out from ash. Roads were buried, crops were lost, and schools and airports shut down. The logging industry, once thriving in the surrounding forests, was devastated. And all over, $1 billion in damages were reported, making it the most costly volcanic eruption in U.S. history. But out of the destruction came innovation. Just months later, the Cascades Volcano Observatory was established, just 45 miles from Mount St. Helens. It became the hub for studying volcanic activity and improving early warning systems. The lessons learned here didn't just stay in Washington. They influenced volcano monitoring worldwide, from Iceland to Indonesia. Today, Mount St. Helens is one of the most closely monitored volcanoes on Earth. And because of what happened in 1980, the world is better prepared to face the next eruption, wherever it may be. Before 1980, there were few standardized procedures for volcanic disasters in the U.S. But afterward, federal agencies like the USGS and local emergency managers began developing new response strategies. They created evacuation protocols, public alert systems, and communication plans to keep communities informed. Mount St. Helens is more than a natural disaster. Its eruption reshaped landscape and communities, but it also showed that from destruction comes regrowth. This was the story of Mount St. Helens, the volcano that changed the way we study eruptions. Thank you again for watching the video. It will continue to get better as I create more. If there is anything that would make the video more enjoyable for you, please let me know in the comments. Thank you.